Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Tark Talks, the most disposable show on the show where we take a look at bits and pieces of gaming news from the last month or so that I found interesting, and we go over them and I give you some light opinions on the matter. I didn't put one of these out last month because there wasn't really enough that piqued my interest to really fill a show. And even this month, with everything getting cancelled and delayed, the show's gonna be a little bit light. But there are a couple things I want to talk about. Let's start with the obligatory Falcom news, as we got a few stories to go over and we're gonna hit them in something of a chronological order. First off, NieR No Kiseki Kai has released in Japan, and it's not been met with the most glowing response. Thing is, NieR No Kiseki Kai is more of a port than a remaster or anything else of the sort. In terms of effort put into it, we're looking at something comparable to the Dark Souls remaster, maybe even less. UI elements have been cleaned up, and the character profiles are nice and high resolution, but everything else appears to be textures from the PS Vita Evo version of NieR No Kiseki. Evo was of course a decent visual improvement over the PSP version, save for the strange lip sync animations that they have actually axed from this version. A lot of people were disappointed that Falcom didn't put more work into this, or at the very least that they didn't use the textures from the PC port of NieR No Kiseki. I can see why people wanted more. After all, straight textures made for the Vita being blown up to 1080p just doesn't really look very good, at least not without some really good anti-aliasing. But as far as the PC textures go, those are in a bit of a licensing limbo. Falcom didn't create the PC ports of the entire Crossbell duology on their own, and so it seems that they don't own the textures that were put into them. Maybe Falcom just didn't think it was financially smart to buy or license those textures for this new port, or they deemed that porting them over to a new operating system was going to take longer than they wanted, and would push them outside of a beneficial release window. But for whatever reason, we don't have those textures. This has caused many people to claim that the unofficial fan translation of the game, which I will not name drop here, is actually the definitive edition. The reason I don't want to talk about the fan translation too much is that, while it is a lot of things, it is not invincible. My worry is that when it comes to getting Kai localized in the West, the bigger the spotlight the fan translation has on it, the bigger the target it has on it. If it appears to the localizers that the fan translation is a derivative work that directly impacts sales of an official license release, then that fan translation could very well incur some legal repercussions. A cease and desist or a takedown notice. That all said, I think the fact that NieR No Kiseki Kai is a PlayStation 4 game, a system console players are actually likely to use, will still make a Western release more than justified in the West. Next up, there's not much to report here, but NieR No Kiseki Kai has a release date in Japan slated for May 28th. I don't expect AO will look any better than Zero did, but there will be at least a tiny bit of new content, so that may be rather fun to look forward to. And the last piece of Kiseki news today is on Hajimari No Kiseki, which recently got a release date slated for August 20th of 2020. But that's not all we got. This next bit of news is a little bit older, but it's interesting nonetheless. It appears Hajimari No Kiseki is going to be a bit more experimental than most Kiseki games in its approach to storytelling and narrative format, using something they are currently dubbing the cross-story system. This works a lot like those dungeons you often come across in RPGs, where the party has to split up into different groups and you switch between the groups to conquer the dungeon. Only with Hajimari No Kiseki, it sounds like this is how the entire game is going to work. Let's say you adventure with one group of characters until a big story event. You can then switch to one of your other two groups of people, and just for example, let's say they're in a town. You can go around this town now and talk to the NPCs, and their dialogue will reflect the progress your other groups of adventurers have made. At many points throughout the story, your three groups have opportunities to cross paths, and in these unique instances, different permutations of each meeting exist to reflect the order in which you progressed with each party. It is highly likely that the story itself is just as linear as they always have been, as in there is a overarching and defined plot that cannot be swayed from, but you do have a choice in which of the three linear and interconnected storylines you want to unfold and at what rate, and this will change how many scenes play out as you go and what information each party is going to get along the way. A lot of this, mind you, is kind of up to speculation at the moment, as I am working with rather limited information, but this sounds incredibly exciting. That said, writing styles like this do scare me a bit, as it becomes much easier for plot holes to open up and inconsistencies to rear their ugly heads. But if anybody can make this work, it's Falcom. Besides, if I understand this correctly, you can't progress through chapters until all three routes are done, so there is a recurring start and end points to the branching paths that should help keep the plot bottled up nicely. Oh yeah, and one other thing. just one more piece of news here. Trails of Cold Steel 4 was officially announced for localization on April Fool's Day, and I think it's finally safe to believe it's actually true. So let's step away from Kiseki for a few minutes and talk about something that we don't get enough opportunities to talk about these days. Let's talk about NieR, with a capital N and a capital R. Platinum, alongside Square Enix, recently came out with 2 announcements to coincide with NieR's 10th anniversary. First off, we have a remake, or maybe it's a remaster, I'm not sure yet, of NieR Replicant. That's how it's spelt, that's how I'm gonna be saying it. Platinum is addressing the game as a rebuild for the PlayStation 4, and have such titled it NieR Replicant version 1.224744871139 with an ellipses at the end. I guess to indicate that the numbers just keep on going. Much like I do with the Arion album 01011001, you can expect that I'll pretty much never call this game by its full name. For those curious, that long version number is the square root of 1.5, so NieR Replicant is to be taken as NieR 1.5. Or so I've heard from a YouTube comment. I'm not a math scientist, so I haven't actually fact-checked that. Take it with a grain of salt. NieR Replicant is being handled by a studio known as Toy Logic, who, to put it lightly, do not have a strong track record. But at the very least, the project is still being overseen by Yoko Taro and colleagues. And following the success of the incredible NieR Automata here in the West, I doubt they're going to let this game pass through the doors if it's not quite up to snuff. This rebuild is going to be a rather extensive one, seeking to maintain the entire original plot while drastically overhauling the graphics and combat to make it more akin to Automata. On top of this, they're also going to be crafting new additional content to help better tie it into the later released games. But that is only one of the 2 games they announced. Another NieR game titled NieR Reincarnation was also announced, and it's evidently a mobile game. Well, you guys mostly know I don't play mobile games, so if this is the only way to play this game, I guess I'm just gonna have to play a mobile game. We didn't get an insane amount of info on this, but we did get a gameplay video which just shows walking. Just a girl walking with a little ghost following her. And you know what? I'm down for it. If this is nothing but a walking simulator where you explore the ruins and ancient areas related to NieR and the expanded Taroverse, I'm super down for it. I really hope this serves as some kind of Eco-like game without the shitty combat of Eco, where you just get to walk around, maybe push a box and climb here and there, and then get some lore. I'm very much down for anything that can make the lore of the NieR universe more accessible, and I really hope this is the primary function of the game. But even if it isn't, I'll play it for the setting and the music alone. So that about covers 70 to 80% of the news that I wanted to talk about this month. But before we move on to the last story, there are a couple people I wanted to shout out. First off, I want to give a huge thank you to Gaming with Spoons and the Kiseki Nut. While I was shirking my duty of keeping people informed, they were carrying the torch high and keeping me informed and up to date. If you guys want this news way earlier than I bother spreading the word about it, by all means, give them a check. They do this whole shtick much better and more frequently than I do. And to be honest, life's just a little too crazy for me right now to keep up with the news the way I want to, so I am super grateful for the work that they do. Links to their channels will be in the description below. 4 games to look forward to? Well, most things are getting cancelled and delayed, but right now we already have Final Fantasy VII-R in stores alongside Sakura Wars and Trials of Mana. I have all 3 of these games right now, but I'm still working on beating Final Fantasy VII-R. And it's not out yet, but very soon we also have Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. I will be getting this as well, but I have no intent on playing it anytime close to its release. It hasn't been that long since I played it last, and last time I did, I made a nearly 40-minute video on it. I love the game, but can't see finding the time to replay and talk about it again anytime soon. I thought about doing an unboxing as we are getting the Definitive Works edition, but alas, the box only contains a cool art book and the game itself. Not much to actually unbox, unlike the cool-ass PAL version that I'm super jealous of. I will say though, that the name Definitive Works set gives me immense joy. I've long been wanting an English copy of the Xenogears Perfect Works book, but unfortunately that dream has long seemed dead. So hearing it referenced in any way gives me just a little bit more hope that someday it might actually make its way over here. Moving on from here, we have some controversy going on with the official release of the Doom Eternal OST. As it would appear, the official OST that was released to disc has been brick-walled to high heaven. For those who aren't really in the know, what this means is that through aggressive compression and limiting, the volume of the tracks was pushed as close as possible to 0 dBFS. In the process of doing this, the aggressive compression and limiting techniques invite a painful amount of compression distortion. If you're unfamiliar with this, basically if you ever listened to a track and felt like it was causing your speakers to crackle, even at low volumes, that's the sound of compression distortion. Your speakers aren't crackling, that's just how clipped and crushed the audio is. This is frankly not how you mix music, but it is how people believed music should be mixed during the early 2000s when the loudness war was in full effect. In short, the belief at the time was, the louder the music is, the more it's going to sell. Unfortunately, when you go to these lengths to be loud, you lose many more important things in the process, not the least of which being dynamics and fidelity. Tracks just come out sounding distorted, grainy, and unclear. For a good example of this in practice, I recommend you all take a listen to Around the World from the Red Hot Chili Peppers' 1999 album, Californication. The compression, distortion, and clipping is incredibly evident on that song if you know what you're listening for. Or for something more recent, try A-Bing the various mixes of Metallica's Death Magnetic album. The version Metallica released is brick-walled to hell and back and it sounds like shit. Whereas the remastered version of the album that the Guitar Hero team made retains all the dynamics and gives great sonic space to each of the instruments so that they can all be heard with clarity. But that's enough of the lessons for today. Unfortunately, Mick Gordon, Doom Eternals soundtrack composer, did not get much say in how this album was mixed, and upon hearing it and seeing what they'd done to his tracks, he was very unimpressed, to say the least. Unimpressed enough that he has stated he doesn't believe he'll be working with id Software and Bethesda ever again. And I don't blame him. The dude is an artist, and they just splashed random paint all over his Mona Lisa. That said, I really do hope that this isn't the end of them. Doom and Mick Gordon are a match made in heaven. At the moment, Bethesda is trying to say that they're not at fault, but it seems like there's still more truth to uncover here. So unfortunately, this is a story that won't be finished today. So that's about all I have for you guys this month. I did consider covering the Cooking Mama drama, but I feel like that's been covered to death. I had also filmed a good 3 to 4 minute segment on The Last of Us 2 and the leaks going on with that, but after editing all of the audio together, I realized, I don't really have enough that I want to add to this situation, and the conversation around it is just way too fucking volatile for me to want to deal with for the next few days. So that is where I'm going to leave it this month. So if you guys like the video, you know the deal. Like, comment, subscribe, and share the video if you can. Links to all of my socials are in the description below, along with the channels I talked about earlier. As always, folks, thanks for watching.